He told me story after story that would leave anyone dumbfounded and angry.
The officer comes around the corner and just boots him in the face as hard as he can. He just turns and just smacks her, like, open. Got out and threw the guy off the bike, picked up the guy's shoes, threw the guy's shoes onto the roof.
I had heard about some of this stuff already from Mike's Twitter feed. What I really wanted to understand was why it happened. How does this culture of contempt and violence towards black people take hold in a police department like Baltimore's? And how is it perpetuated, even after an entire year of police scandals being in the headlines?
How has the climate sort of in the city shifted since Freddie Gray was killed and the riots happened? I mean, these people that we just passed, like, do they live in fear of police? They live across the street from where Freddie Gray was killed.
Right, so what they fear is that we can get away with whatever we choose to get away with. The laws are to the point where anybody can be locked up pretty much for any time. Like, one of the cases I did in the Senate in Maryland I testified to was how you can't actually drive a car legally. I mean, it would be impossible. No one can get this car from here to the end of the street completely legally.
So an officer can arrest you at any moment?
At any point in time. So you're constantly ready to be a problem.
The key thing to understand, Mike told me, is that in many cases, the officers who treat people like that are doing so because they're afraid.
I've always thought that those are the ones that actually cross the line more. It's the ones that are afraid. And that's our standard in policing, is fear. So if you're afraid, you can do whatever you want. That's the legal standard.
Oh.
So if I am afraid that you can take my life, then I'm allowed to take yours legally.
Where does the fear come from then? Like in the guys that do have the fear, it sounds like you think that a lot of them, or most of them do.
We're pussies. I'm not afraid to say it. They were the people that were afraid before they came in, and just because you got a badge and a gun doesn't suddenly mean you're not afraid.
I don't think most people think of police officers as being afraid, as being primarily afraid.
Definitely afraid. There's cops that won't get out of their car when there's a fight with a guy and another officer.
To some extent, they're taught to be afraid, right? That we were, those victims. Yeah. They've shown videos in which guys who hesitate, a second too long are blown away by some madman in the street.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. I mean, that is actually what they show you. They show you the videos. There's an infamous one of a cop who is getting shot at and actually just seems afraid to pull the trigger at another human being. Like the guy was so empathetic that he couldn't, even though he was going to lose his life, he couldn't bring himself to kill another human being. And that's a video they show all the time.
Fear, Mike said, has a nasty tendency to turn into a kind of constant low-level anger. To close out our tour, Mike took me to a part of Baltimore that was very different from everything we'd seen so far. A white neighborhood on the north side of town. It's where he was transferred after about 4 years on the force. He found the contrast astonishing. He also found it difficult to make his numbers because all of a sudden he didn't have anyone to arrest. His solution? Drive 2 blocks away to a part of the town where he could easily find young black men.
So who would you arrest here? For what? It seems like you need a reason. You were saying earlier that it's hard to...
But you don't. That's the thing you're not understanding. So, they were in the street.
That's it? Enough. That's enough?
Yeah. Jaywalking. Okay, so if they throw a cigarette on the ground, you can do it. And people do those petty arrests. You'll see them. So Freddie Gray being arrested for a spring-loaded pocket knife, you can't tell me that black people carry spring-assisted pocket knives at a greater ratio than white people do. That's or even Hispanics because they're doing the construction sites around here. That's a ridiculous thing to say. Of course we all have I have a spring-assisted pocket knife. Conveniently, legally, there's an exception for police. Imagine that. So when you go and you look at the arrest records, what are you going to see? But the people here are carrying spring-assisted pocket knives at the same ratio as the people up there. So we're not focused on the crime of the spring-assisted pocket knife. We're focused on the crime of being black and poor.
Listening to Mike talk, I found it depressingly easy to understand why distrust and hostility flow so freely between the police and the city and the communities they're supposed to be protecting. That us versus them mentality that Mike was talking about earlier, it gets reinforced and sharpened systematically, almost by design, and it poisons every interaction that cops in Baltimore have with the city's residents. Until the police figure out what the people who live here actually need from them, what it would take for officers to start improving people's lives instead of making them harder, sadder, less free, the anger and the fear that Mike Wood saw on the job are just going to persist.
We're setting the stage and then going, oh my gosh, look at this stage. Well, yeah, we created it.